What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Kyle Smith, Arizona drummer here, and guys, I'm so excited for this one. Welcome to Behind the Kit episode 3. Now, today's guest is an absolute monster behind the kit. You've probably heard his recordings from bands like Periphery, Sky Eats Airplane, Darkest Hour, and so many others. He is known for his mind-bending independence, his insanely creative grooves, and his relentless work ethic. He's known both as a session drummer and as a solo artist releasing his own musical material. In this interview, we dive deep into his approach to practice, his creativity, how he's carved out his own voice in our industry, and what it's like being a modern working drummer. Now, this is a masterclass in discipline, artistry, creativity, hard work, and I'm so excited to get into it. Today's guest is none other than Mr. Travis Orbin. This interview is one you don't want to miss. So let's get into it. Hello everybody, it's Kyle Smith, Arizona drummer here, and I am joined by Travis Orbin. Travis, thank you for joining the channel today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So for those of you who may not know who Travis is, he's known for so much. I mean, any YouTube video you've seen of his is definitely blown you away. But he's known for working with Periphery, Sky Eats Airplane, currently with Darkest Hour, but also your solo work is unbelievable. Like, just some of the coolest music that's out there right now.
I thank you.
Of course. In my opinion, what you're known for, at least to me, is you're hyper-technical. I think you're experimental. Your polyrhythms are like second to none. But more importantly, like, you're genre fluid. Like, you could pretty much fit anywhere. You could do the extreme stuff, you could do the groovy stuff, but most importantly, you just know this instrument top to bottom. So I'm just really honored to get a chance to sit with you and talk to you about, your experience with the instrument or industry. But I think what's sometimes the most interesting and the most telling is just starting with learning more about you. How did you pick up the sticks for the first time? What brought you to the instrument? And maybe we'll just start there.
All right. Well, firstly, thank you for the very gracious introduction. And I think I don't have I like to say I don't have a pots and pans kind of story. I have a beating on desks story. I aimlessly would beat on desks with my hands. I wouldn't use implements or sticks or anything that resembled as such. I would do that in grade school, and much to the dismay and detriment of my class. My classmates enjoyed it, but the teachers not so much. They would, fairly implore me to stop. So that went on for a number of years, and then I discovered Metallica, and I discovered them with the Enter Sandman video way back in 1991, and that eventually prompted me to save up some money and explore the rest of their discography. And so one day I chanced upon the Injustice for All cassette, and just that, and that basically caused a sea change that has rippled to this very moment. And so that compelled me to beat a little less aimlessly and try to actually recreate some rhythms, and also to air drum. I've never really air drummed before, but this record prompted that from me. And that's when I started with this whole, I think I want to try playing the drums. And so my parents started me off kind of slow. They got me they introduced me to a practice pad, eventually a very cheap synthesizer kit that they probably got secondhand somewhere, but that did not dissuade me at all. It only further inspired that feeling, and eventually, for my birthday and Christmas gift combination, I got my first kit, and I didn't shower for a week practicing. It was just every day. So yeah, I just kept that up. I didn't have any sort of formal education for the first year. I would just kind of explore the instrument and sort of play along to the radio. But my parents just, they wanted to see that I wasn't malingering in my pursuit, and it wasn't a phase, basically. And so after a year of playing on my own, they got me private lessons.
That's awesome. So I have to ask, what was the first kit? Do you remember? If it was Pearl Export Yamaha?
Yes, it was a black Pearl Export. There were two Zildjian Amir cymbals, which they have. I don't think they've made those since the 90s. And a single pedal, and a cooler as a throne.
I know those days. I'll tell you a quick story. Gosh, when I first started playing out, because I started when I was 8. Very similar story. My uncle plays guitar, and he's been playing forever. And he wanted me to play guitar. He's like, "Come on, try it." And I'm not gonna lie, I have little hands and like no dexterity, so it wasn't happening. But my mom would see me again, same thing, tapping on desks and kind of picking up rhythm. And so she's like, "Okay, well maybe drums is the thing." And I'm like, "All right, let's try it." But then what really sold me was Slipknot's self-titled album in 1999. I heard that and I was like, I did not know that drums could be that. And that's like where I started, was like at that level of just like, oh my gosh, I want to do this. Obviously you can't play that when you're a kid just starting, but I was like, I want to do this. And so same thing, I started, with a practice pad, just, one of the little tiny Remo ones that are like harder than the floor, because this is way back when. And then my parents surprised me, same thing, kind of birthday, Christmas present, with a Titan drum set, which was like this crazy off-brand thing from eBay at the time that came with the cymbals, that you'd like hit once and they just bend into shape. But again, same thing. You just rip through it, and you get in the room and you're just like, I'm just so happy to be behind a kit. And you're like, I just want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. So, but the story I was going to tell you is, when I was young playing a show, I had one of those just crappy thrones. Again, it's like cardboard with some fake leather on it. And you're playing and then it just broke and like snapped off and fell on the ground. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
I think my cooler is probably more stable than that.
Yeah, right. So obviously Lars has got to be a pretty big influence, but what are some of those influences that really got you started when you first started learning the instrument?
Well, I was pretty fortunate in that regard. Radio music back then was like Nirvana and Soundgarden and all that great last wave of American rock bands. And so I was into all those people, but actually shortly after I got my first kit, I bought another just happenstance sort of situation. I just wandered into a mom and pop kind of instrument store and found a VHS of Dennis Chambers' Serious Moves. And so I still like, that video is phenomenal. His playing on it is just extraordinary. And I was kind of exposed to like an influence, and my first exposure to like a super drummer, if you will.
Yeah.
Who's just like head and shoulders above anything that you would hear on the radio. And coupled with playing, really sophisticated like jazz fusion.
Yeah.
But I was not turned off at all. It was something about obviously the viscerality of Dennis's playing, but also with so much style and aplomb. And like that video just took up residence in my VHS player for many, many months. And so Chambers was a big one, and then I guess the next one after that would be David Garibaldi of the band Tower. I used to play to this is called Soul Vaccination Live. I think that came out like 1999. I used to play to that record a lot, and it definitely informed and inspired a lot of what I was interested in at the time. And then the next big mutant to come along would be Virgil Donati. And to this day, I like to say he's my gun to the head, you've got to pick favorite drummer.
Which, to your point, it's a hard question to answer. But like, if you're going to pick one, like Virgil Donati, you can't really go wrong. I mean, talking about creativity on the kit, like, anytime you see him, it's funny you mentioned that. So we're going to get into this in a second because I want to talk about how you create and compose music. But I think one of the things that makes us unique as drummers is you could take any riff, any music element, and every drummer is going to approach it a little different. And I think what makes a drummer's sound is their unique approach to whatever that thing is, you know. And Virgil is one of those guys that just has his sound. Like you never know what to expect because he's always going to come at it kind of a weird creative way. But then two, you kind of also know what to expect because he's got his style. He's got his unique, approach to the instrument. And I think that's a little bit of what this whole series is about, is talking about all of our own unique interpretations of how we communicate through the music. So great choice. I think if I had to pick a favorite drummer, oh my gosh, I don't think I could do it. But right now, because it always changes for me, I think my OG influence, if you want to call it that, was probably Joey Jordison. Just because, again, that's what kind of got me started. But now it's more along the lines of, Gavin Harrison, Larnell Lewis, some of those just like really creative powerhouses behind the kit that just, like, to me, it used to be speed and power that was the most important. Now it's groove and technique and flow. And so but then putting it all together. So it's, again, kind of what led me to you, which is like, talk about somebody who does in practice and in profession put those things together of speed, intensity, but then also groove and flow and feel. So that brings me to that question. Sorry, long answer, but brings me to my question, which is, you are unique in the sense that you'll often write the full composition from scratch, like guitar, bass, drums, you'll record it yourself, like all of it. What is it for you that kind of sparks or creates that spark for the new piece? Is it a groove, a riff, a concept? You just like think of it in your head? I talked to Gavin the other day and he mentioned that sometimes he'll be like in bed and he'll think of a beat and get up and write it down. So like, what is it for you that kind of gets you just like, okay, I gotta explore this and create this piece of music?
Well, inspiration can strike at literally any time. It could be moments before I drift off to sleep, or it could be when I'm doing a very monotonous task. As far as the source material, obviously my early material, and still a little bit to this day, it was very much informed by drums. I have like notebooks filled with scads of drum patterns and grooves and unique creations. And I used to use those as the skeleton for a lot of that really early material. But as my, I guess, artistry blossomed and I started embracing more roles as far as like what I could do with my own material, the mix, the production, the playing of other instruments, once I gave myself permission to do those things, gave myself permission to, be a vocalist and try that, all these other elements kind of drifted in naturally. And so I would hear, a vocal melody or a lyric, and then maybe I could take that and sing the line into like a tuning app and then see what the notes are and then use those notes as the skeleton of a song or the chords or whatever. So at this point, yeah, literally anything can inform it. I mean, I've done very experimental records with like soundscape pieces where I just took like a voice memo and just took that one clip and made a composition out of it. So, yeah, all sorts of strange oddities inhabit my mind, but also very normal sort of chord progressions as well.
It's funny, I was showing my wife some of your music yesterday, and trust me, she's has no choice but to like have an appreciation for drummers just because I talk about it all the time. But so she's like, that's the same guy? Like when I was showing her some of the different songs, and I'm like, yes, it's the same guy. Because the music is so varied and it's so, but it's also like the arrangements are so, I don't want to say complex because they are, but like they're also like just really good to listen to. And so one of the things that I think is interesting when it comes to composing music versus performing the music, right? Because a lot of us drummers, maybe we write our parts, or maybe we're given parts to play if we're hired gun or whatever the case is. So you're kind of just focused on performance. But for you, it's kind of both. So when you're looking at maybe the concept of music, creating music, whatever the case is, do you see music as more of a element of composition, so that's kind of where your passion is? Or do you kind of give yourself into the performance part of it, or are they both? Is it kind of tied together? Basically, do you see them separately, or do you see them as one thing?
I would say overall I'd see them as inseparable. But it also is highly contingent on the type of composing that I'm doing. I kind of view it, to kind of really strictly delineate it, I view it as a, like, note for note composition, which I almost always do in Guitar Pro, and then a extemporaneous composition, which is typically more of the experimental stuff that I've done, especially like manipulating sound clips and such. So with that, the latter process, yeah, I tend to take a sound clip or some sort of noise, or I'll sit with a synth and come up with a progression or something, and I'll just start with that one element and build from there. Like I said, in a very extemporaneous stream of consciousness kind of fashion. But there's inherent performance in that. You're following your intuition and reacting to things in the moment, and that's all part of musicianship, of artistry. But then, of course, note for note composition, that can have a tinge of that stuff. You can get locked in, the flow state, as they call it. Things you could experiment, and things just kind of drift into the forefront. But yeah, overall, I'd say it's a marriage of both styles. But there can be a hard line between releases. If you're talking about something like Dottie Ditties, all that stuff is done in Guitar Pro. But a record like The Sound of Non-Existence is almost, which is like over 100 minutes long. Most of that was extemporaneous.
Yeah, and it's funny because I agree with you 100%. And the kind of genesis of that question is, I feel like a lot of, whether you're a new drummer or maybe you're just new to playing with others, obviously learning to listen, learning to serve the song, all those things are kind of skills you maybe don't know you need to learn until you start to do those things. And I think a lot of the times, as you're getting into the instrument, the composition part is not as important as the performance part, because you're playing along to Injustice for All, or you're playing along to Nirvana, or whatever it is, and so you're like, hey, I'm doing this. And so it's just interesting, because for a lot of drummers, the composition kind of starts and ends at, here's my band, here's my part for the song, and I kind of move on to the next thing. But again, I'm just always so wildly impressed by like what you come up with, because again, another thing Gavin said to me that I thought was really interesting, and I'm curious to get your take, is you can hear a drummer's personality in the way that they play. Every note they hit, the approach they take, their creative solution, or what he would call the rhythmic design to whatever the pattern is that you're playing to. So what are your thoughts on the importance, but then also kind of how we do that, how we show our personality through the instrument?
I think it is contingent on the music. That's a tough question.
Right?
Yeah, I don't know. It's it would be interesting to see place a drummer, like, I don't know, randomly I'm picking Dave Lombardo for some reason, he's in my mind, to put him on a Pixies song and see how he plays that. And I guess that can be sort of indicative of a person's personality. But yeah, like their personality, their temperament, their mood. But I think it can also just reflect their, I guess, the breadth of their knowledge, not just technical stuff, but what their musical sensibilities are informed by.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have anything further to add. I agree with what Gavin says. Yeah, personalities do sort of shine through it, but it can also be deceiving. You can get someone that's uproarious to calm down and play eighth notes.
Yeah, that's that. You're talking about me. Just kidding. I got a ridiculous double bass kit back here just because it's so much fun to play. But to your point, the one I take out live is in the other room, and it's a 3-piece or 4-piece, whatever it is. So, to your point, like yes. But the reason I asked the question too is because we have to talk about Darkest Hour. Obviously, joining Darkest Hour and going out on tour with them, and I saw the cool Crystal Beat kit that you're playing on. Getting the gig. Obviously, you're picking up the drums. You're playing live with them. What has that gig been like for you? Getting the gig. What was the process like? And then obviously, how have the tours been and things like that, and kind of picking up the sticks for them, but then also creating for them. As you move forward.
So this was back in 2011. They had parted ways with their original drummer, Ryan Parrish, and they were working with a fill-in, and they did a few tours with him, and they started sort of doing pre-production, like writing for the next record, and they enjoyed playing with him, but they felt like something was kind of lacking, and they happened to be renting a B room at my friend Taylor Larson's old studio. And one night, everyone had left except for Mike Schleibaum. And he got to talking to Taylor, and Taylor was like, "You got to check out my friend Travis." So I can't remember who contacted me, but someone was prompted to get a hold of me and see if I was interested. So I I charted 2 songs from The Human Romance, which is the newest record at the time. And I think I rehearsed them at home like one time each, and then made the drive over to Bethesda, Maryland, and set up and played. And the first thing I did with them was I asked if it would be all right if we played everything at, I think, 40% of the tempo. The original tempo, and they were like, okay. Yeah, sure. And so we did that, and they immediately hated it and then immediately loved it. It brought to the surface a lot of mistakes that they were making when they were playing the song.
Yep.
Not only had they not played live with the drummer that played with the click, but this process was totally foreign to them. Mm-hmm. So we did it at 40% tempo, then 20% in the performance, and then we just kind of hung out and shot the shit for a bit, and we enjoyed each other's company. We enjoyed just the general interaction and playing together. And so I think from there they went out and did another tour with their fill-in. And then I went home, and at that point I started professionally doing sessions from my home studio. Mm-hmm. So I had plenty of work there, and I think I was doing something else. I think I was, at that time, I was transcribing some, I'd done some work for Chris Adler doing some Lamb of God transcriptions. Oh. Anyway, they came back, and this was March of the next year, March 2012, and we got together for our first pre-production session, and actually some of the material that we wrote made it to the self-titled record a few years later. So we did those pre-production sessions throughout 2012, and I played my first gig in, I want to say, November of 2012, and that would have been the California Metal Fest. And I'm still not, officially in the band, just kind of exploring our options here. And yeah. So from there, we did maybe like one more pre-production session, and then I did a little Weekend Warrior kind of thing with him. I think that was in California. And that was early 2013. And then more pre-production, and then finally we went public with it. We were in no hurry on either side.
Yeah,
they had stopped playing with the fill-in at that time, and they were solely focused on writing the record, and I was in tow for the whole process. Mm-hmm. So we went public with it just before my first tour with them, which was May 2013. And the first tour was, you remember the whole Tim Lambesis fiasco?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
As I Lay Dying was supposed to be either the headliners or the direct report for the tour that we did, and so them dropping off got us the gig. So Killswitch Engage were the headliners, and we were part of support.
That's a great tour, especially in 2013. Like, 2010s, I always joke that was like the best time for our kind of music. It's still there, don't get me wrong, but that was like the best time for that music. Yeah, that's awesome. So, obviously, pre-production, picking up the sticks, learning the songs, kind of making sure that you meld, and then now you've been touring with them. When was your guys' last tour? It was just pretty recent, wasn't it?
Yeah, we did. We were support for Decapitated, and God, who else was on that tour? Oh man, I should know this. Who was the band after us? God, I am drawing such a blank. Anyway, it was Decapitated, and that finished in early March, and then we did 4 or 5 headlining shows because the tour ended on the West Coast, and so we had to get back to the East Coast, and so we did some shows on the way back, and then we did the Decibel Metal and Beer Festival, which was early April. And that was our last show.
Nice. That's awesome. And again, it's one of those things where, sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so I've got like this weird phlegm. But so one of the things we focus on these interview series is like what I like to call landing the gig. So it's, what it takes to get the gig, what it takes to, once you have it, to keep it, because again, a lot of us can get excited or maybe overzealous and then we could lose the gig. So to your point, like, I think what's great about that story is you were available, you were professional, you were consistent, you stuck to what was important to you. I do want to talk more about the BPM story because I think that's really interesting. But you stuck to your guns, you stuck to your values, but I think the most important thing is you were consistent, professional, and available. So one of the things that I lead with on my channel, like my little slogan, is professionalism, maturity, and grace. Those are the things that I think are most important when it comes to being a professional in our industry. But then also consistency. You obviously want to be consistent with all those things. And so, to your point with that fill-in drummer, he was serving the needs for the band. They playing the shows, things were going really well. There was just something missing. And I think that something that's missing is what I like to call like the total package. The relationships, the feel, the experience, the personality, right? All the things we were just talking about that you bring to the instrument. And so I think it's just really cool to kind of, obviously all kudos to the fill-in before you, but like you were the right guy for the gig, for the time. And I think that's important because, in the industry, or maybe what we see today with, and again, I'm saying this as somebody who does drums on YouTube, but for YouTube drummers, social media drummers, there is some of the, quantizing, editing, like I want to look the fastest or look the best, or I don't make mistakes. And skill's really important, like it is. But the skill is like the one thing I think that's pretty universal. I think what takes you to that next level is your professionalism, your understanding of the instrument, your expertise, all those different things. And so those are some of the things I like to focus on in the channel. So why I say that is because the 40% BPM thing is really interesting. I have a little bit of a side tangent there, but I just want to kind of ask you, what was it that made you go, hey, let's try this at 40%, let's try this at 20%? Is it just to get the feel? And I think I know the answer, but I want to ask you because I'm just curious to kind of get to know your thought process.
Well, it was simply because I wasn't that familiar with the material, and I didn't want to just jump right in and screw anything up. Yeah. And plus, it is something that I have kind of enforced, if you will, and ever since I was playing with Periphery, actually, and everyone kind of, it may be a bit off-putting at first, but everyone eventually takes to it, and so, yeah, maybe it could have been probably construed or misconstrued as unprofessional of me to do that, but it wasn't like an audition sort of environment. It was very loose and just kind of a get together, hang sort of thing. So that's why I did that. I wanted to kind of show them this side of me, and also not screw up.
I think that's fair, but I also think it kind of demonstrates your knowledge of, I can't remember who said this, so if I can find the quote, I'll put it in here. But if you can't play it slow, you probably shouldn't play it fast. So it's like you always want to start slow. You always want to make sure you have the technique, the actual fundamentals of whatever it is you're playing before you play it at full speed. And so I think that's just, to me, I was really impressed by that because, again, you kind of just stuck to your guns. You're like, hey, I think this is the best way for us to run through this. And they went along with it, which is kudos to them. But if anything, I would say that's extremely professional because you have self-awareness. You understand that, like, you want to make sure that this clicks, this feels right. Let's make sure we can play well together before, we start running through this at full speed. I've played live now with dozens of bands, 50% with a click, 50% without, right? Like, everybody's kind of a little bit different. And one of the bands I played with about 2 years ago, I got them onto a click because I'm like, guys, when we're playing live, we're playing everything like 3 times faster than the album. Like, you can't even hear what's going on. And so first time we rehearsed with a click, they were like, this feels wrong. This feels slow. I'm not comfortable. But then, to your point, you start doing it more, and they're like, oh wait, this sounds like the album. Like, I can play this better. I can sing better. And you're like, exactly. And it's so invaluable to play to a click because, again, from the audience perspective, from the band perspective, it just sounds better. And I think even from a feel perspective, and so why I bring that up is, I obviously follow you on Instagram. I look at all your posts, and there was one that I saw, and I can never say this right, but I think it's Ziegler Rocks, whatever the Periphery song name is. I can't say it right. Ziegler Rocks?
Ziegler Rocks, but it's made up anyway. So
yeah, but what I thought was really interesting, or no, I'm sorry, it was on your YouTube. What I thought was really interesting was, so I'm like watching the video, looking at the caption, but then you go down, you have chapters for like the different pieces of musical composition that you wanted to call out. Like, I reduced the BPM here to enhance the groove, or I, adjusted this pattern here. And I thought that was like really interesting because, to your point, it just kind of demonstrates not only your knowledge of music, but your experience and knowledge with feel. And I think that's so important because it is something that gets lost in extreme music, but you've found a way to kind of continue to capture it, which I think is really great. And so before I go into some questions that you may have heard before, but I promise I'm going to try to put a spin on them, have you considered, you mentioned transcripting for Chris Adler. Have you considered doing your own Dennis Chamberlain video, your own educational series, that you could put out there, whether it's a book or videos or things like that, for others to kind of learn from your success and your experience?
Not really. There is an educational component to most of my videos. Most of what I do, there is a readily available free transcription. The only thing is, it's in the Guitar Pro format from which I export. So, but I play such a small kit, there really isn't that big of a hurdle to get over. Like, the way I arrange the MIDI notes would look as it appears, the same as would appear on a piece of traditional, sheet music. So really, the only thing you have to learn at that point are the different correlations as far as the numbers and which symbols that is. And there's also a key. There's a key on my website as well. So the information is out there. If I were to venture into, because I do, I sell video lessons. I give private lessons. I will give lessons on tour if someone inquires. But if I were to take another step into education, it would probably be like a clinic sort of thing. And that, I could see that being a pursuit of mine in the future. But at this juncture, I have a few more solo records that I want to do before I consider that. So between that and then the band and then any session work, my cup is full at the moment.
Absolutely. I think the reason I ask is, and one, I'll link all that below, so I'll link your website, I'll link your YouTube, so people can take advantage of those transcriptions and go check you out and make sure if they don't know who you are, they follow. But I ask that because, again, one of the things I think is really interesting that's unique to your playing is, one, you've optimized your technique for speed and precision. Like, you watch any of your videos, and one, every hit is like clean and concise, but then two, because you do have a very ergonomically set up kit, I think it allows you to just, whatever's in your head, you can just cleanly and clearly, put it out and play it. So, what's your philosophy on stamina training? And then, because I also know that you're into fitness, I'm into fitness as well. But also, like, you've been playing it long enough, there probably isn't as much, but, is there a recovery aspect to it? Do you ever take a break from it and say, okay, I'm burning out on this and I need to step away from drums before I can come back and do this again?
Sure. Yeah. There's definitely a burnout element to it. My approach to practicing is, it largely hinges on a practice routine that I came up with many years ago that I call the bare hand, bare foot. And I sell a video lesson on this. I have demonstrated it on different platforms. So the information is sort of out there, but the whole kit and caboodle is in that video lesson that I sell. But basically, I am timing all four limbs to hit in unison to a metronome, of course, and I am isolating the playing muscles that I utilize on the kit, and I am making the motion as such that, although I'm training very slow, it's the same motion that I employ when playing faster. So, and I will do this for a very long period of time. At my height, when I first started exploring it, and I built up enough stamina to do it, I was doing it at 100 minutes a session, and I was doing those 4 to 5 times a week. And I did that for, like, I think the better part of 2 years, and then I just kind of slackened it. And then there was a period of time where I didn't use it as a practice mechanism outside. I would use it for warming up, before gigs or before recording sessions, but I wouldn't do any extracurricular in practice. But, inspiration, motivation comes and goes. Discipline is forever. So I'm at a juncture right now where I am actually quite motivated, and I'm doing it 2 times a week, an hour per session. And that's supplementing, some kit practice as well. This can be thrown into disarray if I get a session or have for a gig. But that is largely my approach to that. Aside from the bare hand, barefoot, I have done some slower, more traditional, I guess, drill kind of things, like a bomb blast, 16ths on the feet, unison eighths with the hands. That's a great one.
Yeah.
As long as it's clean, and, and that's more like a 5-minute, maybe 10-minute sort of thing. So, yeah. I mean, other than that, those are really the 2 main components of the stamina training, at least at the moment.
Yeah.
There was another question in there.
It was really just about, like you mentioned, the burnout, of like, when do you know, like, okay, I need to take a break. I need to, like, I'm hitting a wall here. And like, I say that because, and then we're going to get into a few other things, but I say that because we all get there, whether it's in practice or we're trying to nail something or write something we can't do. And it's just like, it's kind of like, in the corporate world, analysis paralysis, but it does apply to drums. And so I'm just curious, how do you know when to say, okay, I need to take a break and I'll come back to this, and what is your process for that?
So I may have had burnout when drums were like the all-consuming thing, pursuit, passion, desire for me, but I didn't know it at the time because I was just so motivated and disciplined that no matter what, every day I was in the practice room. But nowadays, I tend to divide up my week in half. So I'll do the bare hand and other stuff, 4 days out of the week. And then the other 3, at this moment, I've been listening to a lot of music and watching a lot of movies. And but other occasions that's happened, or I've kind of split it up, I'll probably be working on another solo record. So I think just juggling different tasks, whether they share a closer relation or not, is really the way to do it. You know, play drums for 2 hours one day, and then the next day play bass for an hour. You know, example.
I agree, and that's a little bit of where this interview series comes from. It's like I love talking about drums. I love talking with other drummers about it. And sometimes when I don't feel like going down back there and sweating for 5 hours, I'm like, I can still have it, but it's a totally different medium, and it's still creative and it's still fun. So I think that's awesome. So I just lost my train of thought, but you said something in there that I wanted to jump on. Session work. You know, for those who aren't aware, you're a prolific session drummer. Like you record tracks for everyone. My curiosity is, how do you approach a session? And again, regardless of style, because obviously that's the biggest thing, is the style is going to be crucial. But kind of what's your process for completing that session for whomever the artist is?
Okay. Well, as you already sort of inferred, it does depend on the music and the artist. But generally speaking, like we're talking like 90-95% of the time, they'll send me a demo of some sort, and then I will chart my parts, I'll interpret what's already there, reinterpret, and then I'll send them a draft, which I send them MIDI files. I will send them a wave file that's converted directly from the Guitar Pro drums. I'll send them my Guitar Pro file, and I'll send them my chart. So they have various ways to look at it. And some people will use both, like they'll look at my chart and they'll listen to the MIDI, and they'll be like, oh, measure so and so needs a revision. But I will send them a draft, and we'll have a back and forth. We'll exchange. They'll give me some critique or revisions requests, and then I'll implement those and send them another draft. And I do this until they're 100% happy with everything, and then I'll rehearse it and then track it. Now, in the occasional instance where they want something that isn't planned, that's unexpected, then I'll just kind of carve out a section, and usually I'll just do like 1 or 2 takes of that. But if they want more, then I'll do it. But it's pretty rare, it's rare to begin with that they would request such a thing. Usually people they like to know what they're getting, and I do that as well because this is a mobile, so to speak, mobile recording session. They're not in the room with me, so if you know exactly what's going to be played, then I know you're going to end up happy.
Yeah. I mean, I love that approach, because you're basically saying, hey, here's my plan. Tweak it, change it, whatever you want to do, without having to do 17, 18, 20 takes. You're like, nope, here's what I want to do. Are you good with this? Great. I'm going to go in there and nail it. And
you get a more consistent drum sound. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm curious, which is crucial, which we're going to talk a little bit about that too in a second. But I'm realizing too, we're getting close on time. So if you have a few minutes extra, I might steal them, but I promise I won't hold you hostage. But I have to ask, you've had sessions of all different types of music. What was the one that surprised you? And you don't have to talk about the artist, but what was the one that surprised you the most? You got it in your inbox and you're like, whoa, okay, like, I guess I'm going to jump into this.
Well, that happens to me every time I get a Pete Peterson song. I don't know if you see any of that stuff, but that is all over the place.
Yes.
I have referenced this record before, but I still really love Interior City by the Gabriel Construct. Gabe is also a friend of mine, and we've worked a lot over the years. I've worked on more Gabriel Construct material, which will eventually see the light of day. We've worked closely on my solo material a bunch, and some other stuff on the side. So, we have a rapport as well as a friendship. But, that record is fantastic and full of surprises.
Yeah, trust me, I've listened to just about everything you've put out, probably. And again, that's what you know, that's kind of why I asked the question, because it goes back to personality and voice, right? Like when somebody reaches out to you and asks you to record drums, like you're gonna compose your parts with your experience, your personality, your voice, and I think what makes it so awesome is like the people are reaching out to you not just because they need a drummer. Yeah, again, there's session drummers pretty much everywhere now. You can find somebody online that'll do your parts. They're seeking you out, you know, and I think that's the part that makes it so interesting. And as somebody who's I've done the session work a few times, and it's one of those things where you're kind of constantly learning, constantly refining. But I did remember the question I was going to ask you. So fitness, I think that's something that you and I both have in common. Now, what I will say, and again, I'm not going to throw cheese at you, I promise, but you're way more shredded than I am. I'm just trying to get big and strong. But again, I'm not going to go down the path because, you know, of like, hey, what's your workout regimen? Because again, nobody wants to talk about that. But I think what is important is, at least for me, what kind of changed my perspective on kind of coming back to this, because I had my daughter in 2012, and so I actually hung up the sticks in 2012. I still played drums, but not professionally. I was doing it, you know, touring and doing all that. Then I hung them up, focused on the corporate world, get a job, get a, you know, that whole thing, taking care of my daughter. That was priority number one. And then when COVID happened, the world stopped. You know, I'm like, I'm going to do this again, start YouTube, get back out there, share my passions, blah, 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 blah. But what changed my perspective, because to your point, you're not always going to be motivated. You're sure as hell not always going to want to go back there and do the work. But fitness helped me with discipline. Before I got into shape, I was a big, heavy dude. I was, you know, because you have kids, you get in this office job, you start eating donuts, and like, I got big. And then I got shredded. Like I went down from 220 pounds to like 130. It was just gross. And it's just like, you know, like veins, the whole thing, because I'm like, that's success. And then I found my balance later. But I'm just curious if you find the same kind of value, and like the discipline that's required with fitness has helped me be more professional, or more committed to the instrument, more committed to composing. We're just more committed to doing the work here because you see the value, I mean, physically, and like having that discipline and what the success looks like.
Oh yeah, I concur 100%. When I first started drumming, I think maybe the same year, I had gotten my black belt in Taekwondo. And so I came from this, you know, that was my thing. That was like my passion. And then I had to cut it short because I needed knee surgery. So that's just that whole passage of time and that commitment to that art form informed, you know, I think it helped at least inform, it contributed to playing the drums, along with just finding something that I loved wholeheartedly. Mm-hmm. And there was a period of time where I kind of just flirted with weights, and but then when I was in my early 30s, I committed, and you know, I actually like came up with a routine. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so something, some sort of physicality has kind of helped me stay grounded and helped inform that self-discipline throughout all of this whole venture.
Yeah,
so, yeah, I agree.
I love the concept of flirting with weights. You like walk by and you're like, hey, as you see him, you're like, one day. But I know exactly what you mean. Like I tried a couple times to get in shape, and then I was like, I don't like this. And then once you just commit to it, like, and you're disciplined, and you're like, it doesn't matter if I feel like it, I'm just going to do it. And I think that even applies to like another part of this channel, which, you know, I think we talked about a little bit when we were messaging, but is chasing your dreams and like what it takes to achieve them. Like you, again, you're a professional in our industry, not just because you're out there doing it, but because you are truly a master of your craft. And I think that what is required to do that is also discipline. You have to be willing to put in the work, and you do a lot of things yourself, you know, recording, tracking, putting out your videos, the transcriptions. I mean, you do a lot on your own. And so I think, to your point, like motivation's one thing. I'm really excited to hear you're motivated because I love what you put out, but the discipline has to take over. And, you know, that's one of those things where it's like, it can be difficult to kick yourself into gear and get in there and do the stuff, especially when you're doing it all yourself. You don't have somebody there kind of pushing you to do it. You have to do it on your own. And I think one of the things, there's kind of two things into this, but one of the things that comes to mind for me on that is another consistent message through all these interviews is, in order to do this for a living, in order to be a professional musician, doesn't matter what the instrument is, or even to just chase your dream, you have to do the work. You just have to do it. There's no shortcuts. There's you talk about 100 minutes doing the barefoot, bare hand exercise, which, by the way, I will link that down below, so if anybody wants to purchase that, they can. But you have to put in the work. And so I'm curious, like, what have you learned about yourself through pushing your body and your mind to the limit, and maybe not the limits of drumming? You might come out with something that blows us even more, but what have you learned about yourself just pushing yourself to, like, I want to be able to do whatever's in my head on this instrument, physically, mentally, passionately, whatever it is?
I've learned nothing. No.
You're like, interview over. Bye, dude.
I really just learn, what I'm capable of. There's very little things as exciting as having an idea and then manifesting it, seeing it come to life. And things happen along the way that were not planned, which can become a part of that expression, which can be just as exciting, if not more exciting, than the initial idea. And so you just kind of learn, I guess the takeaway is you learn to trust your intuition.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You build up that muscle, that self-discipline muscle enough, and you give yourself permission to try things, and then you just learn to trust that the process will see itself out, and you'll have something that you can stand proud behind.
Absolutely. And it's funny, so like, I know we're getting close on time, but I have like 4 more questions. Do you have time for them? If not, it's okay. I'll cut them down. But okay, I'm gonna run through them really quick. Where do you find inspiration outside of music? We talked a little bit about could be doing mundane tasks like yard work, but like, what is it? Where do you find that inspiration outside of music?
It isn't. Like I said, literally, inspiration can strike at any moment. Mm-hmm. But for me, I think it's just, if you remain humble and open to the confounding infinite possibilities of what's possible with music, and you sort of remain like a childish student, always yearning to learn and always yearning to explore, I think that is inspiration enough. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily need to hear a really cool guitar riff, a great vocal melody, a kick-ass drum pattern. I don't need to hear all that stuff to be inspired. I can just sit down and make something. And that goes back to, feeds back into what I was saying before about, trusting your own intuition. So I think maybe early on, I kind of depended on that inspiration. And part of that was all those drum patterns that I had stored up, But now, having amassed the experience, the wisdom, having amassed, accrued all of that, I can just sit down at a computer and or with a synthesizer and just pluck at something and come up with something that I enjoy.
This is a question I'm really curious about, because it goes back to analysis paralysis. I really do think that your playing is as perfect, and again, I'm not trying to brown nose you or cheese you, I promise, but I think that every video you put out, it's like every hit is perfect. Like, you just are so consistent. And I know that comes with all the hard work you put into place. But when you're uploading a video, do you ever allow for imperfection? Or are you really looking at every note and being like, this is not good enough, I need to go back and redo this? Or what's your threshold for that?
When it comes to sessions, I make sure everything is as, basically as they heard it.
Of course.
There's, looser, less inhibited playing on my solo material. There are some sections in Silly String Redux, the song Redux, which is divided into, I think, 5 parts because it's like a 53-minute song. But yeah, there's a couple sections in there where I'm playing a stripped down kit, and I'm actually not playing to a click. So just one random example, but yeah, with my solo material, I'll be a little, little looser with my expectations. As long as the musical idea is if it's translated, then the drums don't have to be 100% on the grid and quantized mathematically perfect.
Yeah, it's funny because I struggle with that sometimes. Initially, when I was doing YouTube, I was like, quantity, just get videos out, get people watching them, and I regret that now because I look at the early years and it's rough. But now it's quality over quantity. Like, just, I don't care if it takes 30 takes, get it right, get it done. And it is not, they're never perfect, but they're perfect to what I want it to be. And I think to your point, like when it's a session, you don't have a choice. Right? You're being hired. You got to do it. When you're playing live, same kind of thing. All right, I'm gonna go quicker, I promise. So, to your point, you do have a pretty stripped down kit. It's very ergonomic, very thought out. What's one piece of gear that you just absolutely couldn't function without? You're already pretty stripped down, but what is it that you're like, oh my gosh? And you can't say sticks or pedals.
It's tough because I change out cymbals quite often depending on the music. And I'm starting to get a decent collection of snare drums now. But I guess I've had this snare since like 2007, my Pearl Reference brass, and it has a really wide tuning range, and sounds great no matter how you tune it, really. It can get the really deep thuddy tones, it can get the more piccolo-ish stuff. So yeah, I'll mention that.
Okay, and I'll link that below too, just because I'm a huge fan of that snare drum. It is truly, in my opinion, one of the best sounding snares just out there. Even, I know the Tama Bell brass has its, notoriety, but I think the Pearl brass snare is more versatile than that one. Don't hate me in the comments for whoever's watching this, but I really do. I feel like it.
Just the snare drum people.
Yeah, just the snare drum people who are gonna be like, dude, what the hell? Okay, so this is speed round. So first thing that comes to your head, and this will be the last questions, I promise. Who is your dream collaboration?
Oh boy.
Living or not?
Oh, living or not? Well, then Frank Zappa.
There we go.
But to give you one that's alive, maybe there's so many, but the one that's popping into my head right now is David Fuzinski. He played guitar in a really strange fusion group called Screaming Headless Torsos, and has a very identifiable sound, and I just love what he does. All
right, I'll tag him in this. Who is your favorite drummer that most people wouldn't expect to be a favorite of yours?
Someone I really enjoy that you wouldn't expect. I really like Travis Barker's playing on that early Blink stuff, Enema of the State. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one. And this is just because I love time signatures, but what do you think is the most misunderstood time signature?
I wouldn't say a time signature. I would say a rhythm.
Okay.
Broken 16ths. People think it's triplets. It's not triplets.
Yeah. That's good. And then I also heard as versus triplets. But yes, I agree with you 100%. I think we already answered this question, but I'm going to say it anyway just in case it's different. But what's your favorite physical warm-up routine?
Bare hand, barefoot.
Yeah,
Well, it's tough because, unfortunately, the only drawback is it does not engage the grip muscles. So what I have to do is I will actually run through the whole set on my we have like a stage iPod, and I'll run through the set listening to that, and then the guitarists are in tow. They have their little belt on, buckle on, whatever practice amps, and they'll run through it with me. So that's what I do first, and then I tend to do the bare hand barefoot after that for like 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah, That makes sense, yeah, just to get the hands warm, and especially because if you don't warm up, that grip muscle can burn out so fast.
Oh, yeah.
All right, last one, and then I'll ask you just a question to say, hey, what are you working on, so we can make sure everybody's kind of knows what's going on with you, so they can stay up to date. But I think we know this one too, but maybe outside of fitness, what is one non-musical thing that makes you a better drummer?
Reading, I'd say. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with that, I know we're a few minutes over, so what I'll just say is, to kind of close this thing up, what are you working on right now? What do you want me to make sure that the people who are watching the channel can continue to stay up to date on? I'll obviously link your socials, your YouTube, everything on here, but what are some of the things that are coming up that you want to make sure that that people are aware of?
Well, for the first time in years, I'm actually not working on any solo material. I do have some session stuff in the pipeline, but I'm kind of in a cocoon stage with the solo material. Like I said, I'm listening to a lot of music, watching a lot of movies. You might be able to see there's a Pierre Boulez conductor 20th century classical music box set behind me that I've been slacking on for a long time. Be listening to many classical pieces as well. So I think the next thing that I do is going to be maybe pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I do hope to start on it definitely before the end of the summer. So that's the solo stuff, that's the session stuff. Darkest Hour, we are in the very early stages of writing the next record. There's no concrete timeline. We're just, working within our own scheduling boundaries. So we'll be writing this summer, and then we have a gig. Well, 3 gigs in Japan. We're returning to
nice.
in early September. And then after that, we have a co-headlining European tour with Bleeding Through. So those are the upcoming Darkest Hour ventures. I literally just put out a new record last month. It's basically like a month old right now, so check that out.
But here's what I'll do. So for those who are watching, I'm going to link the new record that you just put out, the Spotify link for it, YouTube link for it, any links that I can share. I'll link Darkest Hour, your YouTube, your socials. And guys, just please make sure, stay up to date on everything that's going on with Travis, with Darkest Hour, his solo stuff. If you're a musician, I mean, even if you're just an average music listener, it's unbelievable. It's so much fun to listen to, so complex, really interesting, to your point, experimental. And it's one of those things where it's like, if you need some material to inspire you and get on the kit and try to play things that you've never played before, like, it's the best, in my opinion, material right now to do that. As far as of course, man. For Darkest Hour, obviously, I think if you don't know who Darkest Hour is, you've been under a bridge. So make sure to check him out if you haven't already. And again, if you're not following Travis on YouTube or socials, make sure to do that so you kind of know what's going on in his world. But also, there's a lot to learn from you, Travis. And I'll make sure to put your lesson pack in there as well, or your website at the very least. So if anybody wants to pick up lessons or reach out to Travis for sessions, because I'm not good enough, feel free, do that. But with that, I'll just say, Travis, thank you seriously so much for making the time. I appreciate it. So happy to have you a part of this interview series where, again, just to summarize, we talk to pro drummers in our industry that are not just professional because they're out there doing this as a job. They're out there really changing the game. And like I said, I shouldn't say nobody, but you absolutely fit that mold. And so I'm just really happy that you made the time to sit with us and talk.
Again, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.